Hi, this is Gary Auden, and today we have an EDUcast. Not all hybrids are equal. Sponsored by Star2Star and Telecom Reseller. Today with me is Colin Johnston, Executive Vice President of Business Development at Star2Star. And as we always start these off, we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Today you have a lot of business challenges, especially in communications. You also have the broadband network entering your arena. And should you use that? Should you use private network or some combination? One of the things we're going to talk about is a hybrid architecture, especially end-to-end architecture, which a lot of services don't really do. We're then going to move into how this blended architecture really supports reliability, and especially business continuity. How do you protect your business while you're also trying to lower your costs, and learn about the best hybrid solution that's available today. So let's start off, Colin, with before we even start with the challenges, what do people mean when they say hybrid?
Yes, thanks, Gary. I appreciate you putting this on and glad to be here. Really, what we're talking about with hybrid, and it's an interesting topic because Star2Star has been a hybrid solution since our inception over 10 years ago. So I think we were hybrid before hybrid was cool. But basically with a hybrid solution, there's part of the solution resides at the customer's premise, and there's a lot of good reasons for some pieces and parts to reside there. And then you have your other pieces and parts that reside in the cloud. And the way Star2Star looks at that is we take a lot of the, say, heavy iron pieces of a communication solution, some of the most expensive pieces, and we have those as being cloud-based. So there's basically two solutions there where you've got part on the premise and part in the cloud.
Now let's talk about the challenges that you face whether you have hybrid or not.
Sure. So there's a lot of challenges with, particularly if you look at the slide here, with expanding locations. In a cloud-based solution, you can very quickly and very rapidly deploy new locations. You can also expand existing locations very quickly and very rapidly. And you may even have a solution or a situation where you need to add people to your communications platform, but they may not even have a desk phone. They may not even have a location yet. With a hosted type platform, you're able to do that and provide phones and solutions without actually having even a location.
I would say one of the words you're really getting to here is the word flexibility to deal with changes, and that introduces the next point about broadband and how broadband is being pushed into the business environment. It's not just for consumers, and that the FCC is actually promoting this very heavily. What does that influence on us?
Sure. Yeah. You know, the FCC and basically this slide is showing also AT&T's petition to the FCC to basically leave the public switched, PSTN, and they claim it as a relic of a bygone era, and it truly is. Traditional POTS lines, traditional PRI is really fading into history, and obviously at the moment we're moving into more of a broadband situation where broadband is running multiple things at a customer's premise, and the least of which is obviously the communications. So, the regular PSTN is going away. It's actually being legislated away, and it's actually going to expand and become a quicker situation because it's costing the providers far too much money to keep it up and running.
Now, the next picture I find interesting. Carrier points of presence is real important, I think, in reliability, availability, business continuity, and you have a picture here of level 3. What does this mean to me as a customer?
Sure. So Star2Star, we have geographically placed our points of presence across the United States, and we're co-located directly with level 3 using level 3's vector network. So that's basically the carrier backbone. But the benefit that we have being directly co-located with level 3 is that we're right at their what they call PSTN drains. So we're able to cross-connect away from the PSTN. So a customer of ours geographically for latency issues, which we'll get into in a few upcoming slides, we're able to reduce latency. We're co-located directly with level 3 just to cross-connect away from them in those facilities, and we're able to deliver PSTN calls directly through their vector network directly to the customer.
Does this evolve into your constellation architecture?
That's correct, and our constellation architecture brings us a lot of benefits. Basically, with latency across the network, we are at what we use a codec which is G729, which is 32K per call, whereas the traditional hosted platforms are using G711, which is over 100K per call. And basically, our Constellation network works with our Starbox at a customer's premise. And the Starbox does multiple different things, but we have two-way traffic shaping. We don't have NAT traversal. And basically what NAT traversal is if you have a call coming from a public network to a private network on a traditional hosted platform, there's no demarcation point there. The Starbox allows that demarcation point and gives us some intelligence there at the customer's premise, which we'll talk about in another slide that's coming up as well.
Well, let's talk about the competitors now. How are they responding?
Sure. So if you look at this slide here, there's a couple of things that the Starbox does, and if I start with the right side there with route NAT traversal, which is basically bad for SIP, that's what I was talking about. You go from a public network to a private network. It says right in the SIP specifications not to do that, and all of the hosted platforms basically are doing exactly that. So one of the things with star-to-star with our Starbox, if you look at that extension call, 40 to 60 milliseconds, that's basically if you wanted to call the extension next to you, the cube next to you, the office next to you, you're going all the way out to a data center and then back from that data center just to speak with the person, right next door to you. So with star-to-star, with our Starbox, in conjunction with the Constellation network, we keep local calls local. So we're not using any bandwidth to go in and out to make a call from extension to extension. And we also, with the star-to-star network, allow you to basically, one of the things we do is we separate the media and the signaling, whereas with a hosted platform, the media and the signaling are all together. So in this scenario here as well, everything resides in a data center from a hosted standpoint. There's much more hardware, much more power. There's 2 times the bandwidth cost. And really the customer churn rate for most of these platforms is in the 20 to 25% range because of a lot of issues with quality and reliability. And it starts really with having the Starbox on the customer's premise for quality and reliability and traffic shaping.
Then this gets into the point I think is important in the next screen, and that is you have an end-to-end architecture. And a lot of people don't think of end-to-end. They think of what's in the cloud and skip the end.
Sure. And with star-to-star, we looked at multiple ways to deliver our solution, going back 10 years ago. We looked at different SIP trunk carriers to partner with. We looked at building our own platform, and we really came to the conclusion that the only way to do this appropriately was to actually build the platform and deliver the solution and deliver the service. And with star-to-star, we truly are an end-to-end platform. Where we're at one end, obviously, in the data centers, we're at the customer's end with the Starbox. Both pieces work together, built together to work together. So we basically load balance across our network. The Starbox is on the premise, and then we've got obviously the data centers throughout the country to be able to disperse the calls to the PSTN and sometimes directly to the customer site.
A term I've not heard often is the next one, blended architecture. What does that mean to us?
Sure. So with the blended architecture with star-to-star, if you look at the different solution points that we have here, and I know this is a fairly busy slide, but your blended architecture, if we start even with a star phone on the left there, the soft phone, you may have a soft phone, you may have a laptop soft phone, you might have an iPhone app. Those phones are directly connected to one of our data centers, but they're fully blended with the customer's solution. And what I mean by that is I may have a soft phone which might be extension, say, 100, where my desk phone might be extension 101. It's fully blended into the architecture of the star-to-star system, even though that particular extension doesn't reside in a brick and mortar like the rest of the, the customer's solution might. So we also have the Constellation nodes hold things like the voicemail, the auto attendant, the conference bridge, call center applications. Those all reside in the cloud, but they're fully blended with the on-site customer's premise. So you may have call center agents that work in a building. You may have call center agents that work at their home. They could be virtually anywhere within the network as long as they have an internet connection. And with star-to-star, we can blend all those devices together. We can also blend existing PBXs or existing key systems if you have a multi-site customer, and that multi-site customer may have a key system or a PBX that they're not willing to get rid of at the moment, but we need to bring them in and blend them into the architecture of Star-to-Star, and we can do that by delivering SIP trunks to that particular customer. And then once those SIP trunks are there, they become part of the entire system, shared call paths between multiple locations, and basically blending everything together from that standpoint.
I know for one of the reasons people think of hybrid is cost reduction, but you bring up an interesting point here is reducing costs with pooling and bursting. Would you educate us about that, please?
Sure. Star-to-Star has a very unique value proposition and the ability to pool lines across all of those locations that a customer may have. One of the best examples of this with Star-to-Star is we have a national retail chain that came on board, and they had 9,000 locations when they first came on board with us, and they had 9,000 phone lines, one line to each one of those very small distributed architecture locations. With Star-to-Star, they came on board and we gave them 3,000 phone lines shared across all of their locations. And if you think about it, you know, a multi-site retailer like that, they're not really answering the phone in New York when they are in Los Angeles. So instead of having a line per store, we gave them a third of a line per store distributed across all of their locations. And in that scenario, they actually didn't even burst with us. So most companies you'll find in the United States are actually over-trunked. So, you know, when you have a multi-site location, we provide lines that are shared between all of their locations. The savings is phenomenal. That national retail chain, I think the savings was really somewhere close to about $16 million, you know, over the life of the contract by just that one solution alone, being able to pool their lines across all locations.
Do I have this correct that you're essentially charging for the number of simultaneous calls rather than the connections?
That's correct. It's really like dial tone on demand. We have a certain group of lines that are available to all of your locations, and as you pick up a handset, we give you dial tone. You might pick up a handset in New York, we give you dial tone. You might pick up a handset in Los Angeles, we give you dial tone. So it's actually very similar to the way companies delivered phone service in the past to a single location, maybe with, say, a PRI. You've got a bundle of lines, you've got DID numbers, direct inward dial numbers, and whenever you need to make a phone call, you're provided one of those actual channels to be able to do that. And it's very same with Star-to-Star, but on a much, much larger scale for all of your locations across the country.
One of the things that I get concerned about, and I'm surprised at how many people don't realize this, whether we're dealing with HIPAA or financial regulations, if you're a vendor to those companies, you have to be secure and compliant. Would you address those, please?
Sure. I mean, obviously, it's you know, one of the big topics on everyone's mind today is security, and obviously with Star-to-Star, we look at that as well. And when you look at, it mentions here GSA, we're fully GSA certified for government installations, but we also are PCI compliant and HIPAA. And the thing is with HIPAA, it's an interesting thing with HIPAA. There's no such thing for any of us, any of the providers, to say we are HIPAA compliant. But what we can say is that we have a business associates agreement, and that basically says that we will pass an audit for HIPAA compliance. But one of the things with Star-to-Star is we have the Star box, again, that's sitting at the customer's premise. It also acts as a firewall. It does packet filtering. Basically, you've got the ability to program and provision that Star box as your firewall without having to buy another expensive piece of equipment. And when you've got that put in place, it does a lot of things that we have, like I said, with PCI and HIPAA compliance. And we also encrypt the box. So basically with the encryption, we're encrypted from end to end. That gets back to that same scenario where you say, what's the benefit of an end-to-end solution? Well, if you're on both ends of that particular call or that particular stream, you don't have to send a key forward as part of that chain. So it's even inherently more secure, because at the other end, we already know what the traffic is, and we encrypt it, basically, like I said, from end to end.
I'd like to return to the business continuity disaster recovery question. And what I find is a number of companies out there rely so much on communications now that if it goes down, the business goes down.
Sure. Yeah, with Star-to-Star, I actually look at it, you know, people talk about disaster recovery. I really think with Star-to-Star, we're actually offering disaster avoidance. And what I mean by that is everything is predetermined within the Star-to-Star system as far as any type of scenario or any type of failure. We have multiple ways to have disaster recovery. First of which would be if you have multiple internet connections, we can fail over to a secondary internet connection. That secondary internet connection could be a terrestrial internet connection. It could be a 4G, 3G, or 4G wireless connection. So we have that ability, first of all, to fail over to a secondary internet connection. We also have the ability to bring in traditional PRI as a second type of failover, and we also have the ability to bring in a regular analog line for failover as well. Now, the unique thing about star-to-star is we can do inbound and outbound on that failure type of scenario. So you're basically covered, across the board, depending on how fault tolerant that the business wants to be. The other thing with star-to-star, we have actually not had an outage in our network for over 4 years, and I always like to, knock on wood when we say that because, obviously it's electronics and there's issues across the board all the time. But with star-to-star, our infrastructure and our Constellation network has basically not had an outage in 4 years.
That brings up a good question, and I like the next slide is, how do you measure the impact of what you're offering?
Sure. So one of the things that we did is through a company called Tech Validate, we provided them a list of our customers, and they did multiple different types of surveys through our customer base, and basically our customers, we've met or exceeded their objectives by over 90%, and we're satisfactory or better as far as delivering the service by 95%. So customers are looking for reliability, scalability, and cost savings, and we have multiple Tech Validate surveys on our website as well for anyone that would like to see any of that additional information. But it's always nice to have a third party validated as opposed to tooting your own horn.
Now, you've talked about the end-to-end architecture. Would you go back through the details a little bit here?
Sure. So with our end-to-end architecture, again, as you see on the left there, we have our star boxes, cloud connection managers, and that box, again, does multiple different things. It does traffic shaping. It keeps local calls local. It gives us also site survivability. This is very popular with schools and government installations. And what I mean by that is if your internet is completely down, you didn't have any backup solution put in place, the Starbox can also allow you to dial extension to extension. So schools like this in emergency situations and if they want to do overhead paging and things of that nature, the box will still function in that capacity. Then you have our Constellation network on the right side there with multiple points of presence and multiple data centers, and those basically keep our heavy iron pieces, the conference bridge, the auto attendant, the voicemail, allows us to connect multiple site locations, remote locations, iPhone apps, Droid apps, and so on. So it's basically a network that's built together to work together. And the other benefit of that is in the fact that we are on both ends. We do run on open bandwidth. So we run on anything from a DSL to fiber to T1 to cable. We're monitoring and managing that on both ends because we can see both ends of that connection. So the nice thing is if we see issues, if we see problems with that bandwidth, we're doing multiple things all the time to maintain and manage that bandwidth, the least of which is we actually every 30 minutes send tones down to every single box that we have out there, and those tones are recorded and then they're played back to the data center, and we run a pesky score on that, which is very similar to a MOS score, but it's all about the customer's experience. What are they hearing? What are things sounding like? We can do speed tests, we can do ping tests, but what is the customer really experiencing? And that's really one of the benefits of our whole end-to-end architecture, is to be able to see what's going on through the entire network.
Is there anything else about this box you think is important? And one of the questions I have is, do I need a box of different sizes or different locations, or is it just one box out there?
Sure. We actually have different size boxes, and the reason being is if you're a small location, obviously for cost purposes, our small box will go up to 20 extensions, and that's the box you see on the very top there. It's a pretty lightweight appliance. The box right below that will go to 250 extensions, and the box below that will go to 500 extensions. So the box will allow you to have basically different sizes for needs. Now, if you have a single location with a single phone, we don't have to have a Starbox put in place, but it's always recommended for traffic shaping and quality and reliability.
Let's go on and talk more about who you really are.
Sure. Well, Star2Star, we were founded in 2006. We actually became cash flow positive in 2008. which is an interesting time in the economy. I think there was a lot of situations where companies at that time were looking for cost savings, and Star2Star actually became really explosive growth around 2008. So we've been recognized by multiple industry experts, folks like Gartner. We're in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, which we'll talk about. Infonetics has listed us as the 7th largest supplier of phone hosted UC in the United States. We kind of look at ourselves as the 7th largest company that no one knows about. But if you look at the seats installed there, which is the blue on the bottom from Infonetics, we're very highly ranked as far as installations. Financial stability is the next one there. We're obviously very financially stable. Market strategy, service development, and support options. So it's great. We've been actually in the Magic Quadrant for 2 years now with Gartner, and we're considered a challenger in the space, which is just fine with us. I mean, we like to be considered a challenger, be an innovative provider, and really one of the things that's quite nice about what Gartner has said about us is, you know, if we look at, and I don't know if we have it in here, I don't think we do, but they said that we're low cost, we're simple to deploy, and we're suited to support rural locations and optimized for use over public internet. So it's a great write-up that Gartner has put forward for Star2Star, and obviously we're very glad to be part of the Magic Quadrant.
Oh, I'd like people to take note that you can talk directly to Colin. Many times we have someone on these EDUcast, but they're not the party you can talk to, so you have direct contact information with him. Further, there's at least 3 places you should go to look up resources about Star2Star. And as he said, it's one of those companies that you don't know about, but that's really great. Thank you very much for the time today, Colin.
Great. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it very much.